as we watched some of the trade that was going on. It was volatile, and yet it was in a fairly tight range. As a matter of fact, when you look at the Dow, we actually started the day up about 100 points. We steadily went lower. We were down about 120 points, only to finish down just a couple of points, just barely down about 7 points yesterday. Now, on the other hand, when you look at the NASDAQ, it was kind of bebopping around and going through a yo-yo of moves right around that 14,000 level, closed back up above 14,000, finished up the day about 53 points, and a lot of that coming from the semiconductors. When you look at the SMH, absolute explosive move to the upside, all-time highs. It was led by a lot of different names: Lam Research, KLAC 10 Core, Applied Materials. I've got Western Digital, Micron, Maxim, Microchip, Intel. Yeah, I did say Intel back over 60, and the stock was up about 3% yesterday. So a really nice move to the upside across the board when you take a look at that. But crude was really part of what was pulling on the markets a little bit yesterday as well. When you look at the energy, and it was pulling early on at least, down a couple of percent, that was one of the pulls of the negative to the downside. We had volatility in a fairly tight range of 21 to 23. By the way, today, as we price in the weekend, understanding options is very, very important. Understanding all of the different factors that go into the pricing of options, time being one of those. Just remember this: as we price out options, we're closed Monday. Well, if you're closed Monday, that means no trading. So you've got to price that in. So they're starting to price that in. I've already seen a pretty significant push to the downside underneath 21 for the VIX as we're going into the long weekend, because we're pricing in the long weekend. So that's just a real quick, just so you understand why we're seeing a little bit of that pressure, even though the markets are getting pushed to the downside. As a matter of fact, when you kick off these markets, we were down about 30 points on the Dow, down not too bad, but in the NASDAQ down about 20 points, then about 65 points, then now about 30 points. And the Dow has just been kind of bouncing around a little bit. It was down to about 60 points last I looked as well. But I'll tell you what, you know what's not down? Volume. The volume yesterday was absolutely explosive once again, well over that 40 million mark that we've been talking about time after time, especially the month of February. I think maybe only one day have we been below 40 million contracts on one of the trading sessions. Yesterday, 43.6 million contracts. And oh, by the way, Sundial once again, 2.6 million. Everybody's been talking about the GameStop story. That has not stopped everything. The GameStop story moved into the cannabis world. That has been absolute volatility heaven. If you like volatility, which is sometimes gut-wrenching, you've got it there in the cannabis space where you watch. Just take a look at for instance, the movement out of a Tilray or in Sundial or in any of these various names. You are seeing a lot of volatility out there, a lot of movement. Apple did trade over 1 million contracts, but a nice broad spread across so many different categories yesterday when it comes to the rest of that volume. But certainly Sundial does stand out, and we've talked about that one on a couple of occasions. And it's come down a little bit percentage-wise, but still overwhelmingly call activity in that specific name. So that's something that has definitely caught our eyes. So today, consumer discretion definitely pulling on the markets early. Technology pulling on the markets a little bit early. But what wasn't pulling on the markets, actually giving the markets a little bit of a lift, was Disney. Now, we're going to be talking about that. I'll be on the halftime report in just an hour and a half. And I'll tell you, I know we'll be talking about Disney, those earnings, and some of the numbers that are underneath. But the real key to this whole thing is this: the acceleration for Disney of these numbers, when you talk about the subscription model of streaming, is absolutely extraordinary. You've got to take your hats off to everything that they have done. They were late to the game, but they've done a great job of making some major catch-up, and especially, obviously, the pandemic, a huge boom for them. That being said, they still lack the cruise ships. They still lack the kinds of numbers that you're going to need if you're Disney. They've got all these great revenue streams from the parks and all the rest of it, and obviously that has hampered them somewhat. But they destroyed what were the expectations of something very, very negative as far as earnings. And when you look at revenue, they beat that. But you look a little bit deeper, it's still significantly down from last year. So a lot of ways to view this, but I would tell you this: the ecosystem of what we're seeing in streaming now, those numbers are extraordinary and very, very rapidly catching up in just a short period of time with Netflix. Unbelievable. Netflix still has the lead. Netflix still is very, very strong. I'm not saying anything about that. but how Disney has, with their ecosystem for streaming, just exploded to the upside. And it's just been something to marvel at as we've watched. That's why the stock early on at least had a nice little pop. We had some call buying earlier in the week, and obviously discipline tells you what you've got to do. So hopefully people understand that the options markets, you have to react, and you have to be in front of your computer, and you have to understand all of, like I was mentioning, the Greeks or the pricing models and everything else. You understand that, you've got a much better opportunity to be able to have some success. Financials today, very, very strong. Once again, it was pretty nice to see these financials. You look at the 10-year, that's been moving to the upside. It's still at one of the higher levels that we've seen in a while now. Wells Fargo, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Capital One, a lot of these various names moving to the upside. I have been overweight a lot of these financials for a while, and anybody who's been watching understands why. We have seen nothing but unusual option activity coming into the Wells Fargos of the world. We've seen it in Morgan Stanley. We've seen repeated buying in a lot of these various different financials. And you hear me, I'm not saying banks, I'm saying financials. Some are banks, but overall I'm talking about the financial markets themselves. So that being said, let's get to a couple of unusuals, get the heck out of here. Then we got the halftime report. Then later on I'm going to be doing the Fast Money with Melissa Lee. Look forward to that. That should be a lot of fun later on a Friday, just to close out the week and the long weekend. But CARG Gurus. Now this one hit, I got to admit, I had to take a second look and a third look and just kind of find out a little bit more about them. But CARG Gurus, this is CARG is the symbol there. 31.30 was the stock. It was getting hit actually pretty significantly today, selling off. A buyer of 4,100 February 32 calls, paying about $1 for those. So just out of the money, fairly short time frame. Once again, we're talking about February, right? So that's next Friday. This is not out to the 26th. So next Friday these expire. So this has to make a move in a week, but it's right there, and it's pulled back underneath that level just today. So that's somebody who's looking for some kind of a bounce to happen in the next week or so. Next, Footlocker. Now, this one's pretty interesting as well because this is a very successful trade. We love seeing this. They're rolling. So they bought the February 49.5 calls not too terribly long ago. Those have performed very nicely, taking profits from that, but still wanting to be in the trade. So buying 3,000 of the February 52.5 calls with some of those profits, paying about $1.15 for those calls. Stock was trading just underneath 52.5. These are the 52.5s. It was trading 52.40 at the time. Just to give you some reference points and numbers and where that all lines up. Folks, have a great weekend. Have a healthy weekend. Please be safe out there. It's awfully cold across the country. Not just Minnesota, although we are cold. We were minus 15, I think, when I went to the gym this morning, and a wind chill, I think, of minus 29. And I know this is dipping all the way down into a lot of the southern states as well. So be safe out there. Be smart. You don't got to be out in your car. Maybe it's a good idea not to, but if you do, get your blankets and everything else. Make sure you're dressed properly because the cold weather is nothing to fool around with. Have a great weekend, and we will see you on Tuesday at the Take. Take care. I'll see you at noon